Welcome to Families Reimagined. This is a video series that will be going along with our teaching series that we're doing here at the venues in February and March of 2025 called Families Am I Right? I'm Chris, and I'll be the host for each of the episodes here. And we would highly encourage you to check out the full teaching series online at thevenues.org/messages. Today, we are joined by Julie Johnson. She is a licensed professional counselor, both here in Missouri and in the state of Washington. And our hope today is to walk through some really practical steps that we can each take when we're dealing with relationships and with church trauma. And I do want to just kind of give everyone a heads up. Don't worry, this isn't like a sermon. This isn't like something super churchy. Our goal is to provide a resource where we'll be bringing you experts in the field, people who've been going through family changes, and hoping to provide some real concrete steps we might all want to think about. And so let me just start by saying that one of the statements from your website that really resonated with me is this: you long to be known and loved, and it can be so confusing when the person you love becomes the person that causes you the most pain. And so I want to just start, Julie, by asking you to tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you get into counseling? And maybe if someone isn't sure, like what counseling even is, like what that means, if you could just kind of describe for us what that looks like.
Yeah. So my own journey, I got married really young.
Mhm.
We were both in a very fundamentalist evangelical culture, families.
Sure.
And the kind of implicit understanding was that if you know Jesus, you shouldn't have problems. So we were part of a Christian mission agency right immediately when we got married.
Oh, wow.
And it was kind of a high pressure feeling of people watching your life to see if you were good missionary material.
Wow.
And so having problems would imply that you weren't walking with God or didn't know God or weren't good missionary material.
Sure.
So there was this feeling of we had problems right away. I mean, for probably 24 years, we struggled. We got along in some contexts. We were good friends.
Yeah.
We were raising 4 kids.
Yeah.
But we just had this looping cycle of the same conflict over and over and over, and no ability to get to the bottom of it. And so the first time I heard someone sort of start to talk honestly, it was a therapist, and it was in a church context. He was doing some training.
Sure.
And that was what opened the door for me to therapy. Okay. So I began to kind of process my own story. And thankfully, this isn't always the case, but thankfully my partner was also doing his own work and healing. And so then we were able to kind of build a new marriage, basically. Another big factor was our daughter came out to us as queer, our youngest.
Oh, yeah.
And we didn't have answers for that.
Sure.
And we were still in the evangelical church. We knew the answers we were finding in the church were not the answers for us. I don't think we handled it the worst, but we didn't handle it the best.
Sure.
And then that led to sort of the repairing with our adult children. Just, they're all in their 30s now, and they're still processing their stories. And so sometimes they come to us and want to talk about it, and being able to sit in that discomfort of, I know I did this, and I know you need to tell me about it, and I need to regulate myself. I'm starting to feel attacked, or I'm starting to feel like I need to defend myself, and it's like, oh, how can I sit with my child to hear how I impacted them?
When they think about therapy, or about counseling, people have all kinds of different conceptions about what that might mean. So can you kind of just, maybe in your specific practice or just in general, like what would that look like for someone to go to therapy or to go to a counselor to talk about this in a way that might be reparative or might be healing for them?
I get it, because I was raised with sort of the stigma of therapy is for crazy people, or therapy is for mentally ill people, or therapy is for really bad problems. And I think of therapy as a safe place to wrestle with your own questions, your own feelings. Maybe you're aware that you have repeating patterns and you don't know why. The difference between a therapist and a friend, lots of times there's parts of our story that maybe we carry too much shame about, or we feel embarrassed to talk to a friend about, or our friend may have the desire to relieve our feelings. Our friend may be well-meaning, but they're uncomfortable with our distress.
Right.
And so they're trying to fix it. And that's not what we really need. Sometimes we just need someone to really listen and get it. There's a parenting expert, teacher, whatever, that Dr. Becky Kennedy, Good Inside. Have you ever
I've
heard?
not.
Okay. One of her metaphors is life is like a park full of millions and millions of benches.
Sure.
And each bench is an emotional experience. And say, I'll use an example, say your kindergartner comes home from school and they say to you, my best friend didn't play with me at recess. They played with someone else and they're really hurting. You could have any response from stop crying or I'll give you something to cry about to, oh, I'm sure they'll play with you tomorrow. All of those responses are coming from the parent's own distress. And so they're communicating to the child, this bench, this is a bad bench. We don't want to sit on this bench.
Gotcha.
Mom is even scared of this bench.
Oh, wow.
This feeling that I'm having is either wrong or bad or dangerous. When really what we need, what that child needs is for mom to say, oh, that sounds like it really hurt.
Yeah.
You know, and that's sitting with that child on that bench. And in doing so, you're communicating to the child, this feeling is real. My mom believes me. This feeling is safe to feel. And the next time they have that feeling, they not only know all of that, but now they have the feeling of being not alone.
Oh, yeah. That's one of the beauties, by the way, of having a professional therapist do that with you, is that not only are they willing to sit there with you, but they're also trained with tools and metaphors like you were just sharing that really help us process those things. I'm kind of curious about if there are any signs or things that people maybe should look at specifically that might tip them off, that there is something that they might need more professional assistance with.
Sometimes we're aware that our reactions are overreactions.
Okay.
Sometimes we're not. Sometimes this feels like absolute reality,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
But sometimes we know, wait a minute, I'm getting more upset about this than feels like other people do or feels like I should. And to me, that's a tip off. There's some kind of harm or wound that is getting touched. Oftentimes there's a story that gets activated in us that's beyond that moment. So that's where those reactions, where something deeper, there's a feeling of rejection or a feeling of fear that you're mad at me because I don't agree, or, you know, that has a deeper story. And so if you're aware of that, that might be a reason to seek professional help, because that's not going to just go away.
Right.
And then there's other things, like maybe you have the same argument over and over and over in your marriage, the same pattern.
Right.
And it's really hard to sort that out between the two of you. It really does help, whether it's individual therapy or couples therapy. And when we perceive disconnection, it can feel very threatening.
For sure.
And we're not consciously going, I know I'm feeling threatened right now. No, it's a nervous system reaction, right? So we're having this adrenaline rush, or this, you know, sympathetic nervous system that rises up, and it happens in a split second, and we're off, right? And we don't know, why do I get so mad about that? And I think sometimes noticing that that's going on, that's another reason to maybe seek professional help.
And that's so helpful to have someone who can kind of, for the lack of a better term, like help you do that replay, help you find out what that chord is that's resonating. Because sometimes without the help, we can't tell the backstory to ourselves, because we've experienced it and we know it's there, but maybe someone else doesn't. I wonder, do you think that there's still a place for people to seek out counseling, even if there's not like an immediate like triage level event that's going on? Like, is it something that should be done or could be considered as just kind of a preventative measure, if you would?
Yeah. I mean, I absolutely know there are people who treat counseling as if almost like exercise, like a regular practice for them. It feels like they like the rhythm of having a place to go and talk through whatever's going on in their life. For other people, I think it can be, things are fine, but I'm aware of things that could be better. But maybe there's a longing for greater intimacy, or maybe there's a feeling of there are things we can't talk about, or you know, I really wish I knew how to connect to my kids better or my partner better. So I think that's always an option.
I know that one of your specialties is helping people process and deal specifically with religious trauma. And so I wondered, could you just explain for just a second what it means that someone is experiencing religious trauma, or how that might manifest itself in someone's life?
Mm-hmm. That can mean anything from it happened in a religious context. Mm-hmm. It happened at church, in the safety, in the ideal safety of church. It could happen with a religious figure. Mm-hmm. Hillary McBride, I don't know if you've heard of her, but she put it, religious trauma is like meeting your inner critic and then calling it God.
Oh, wow.
So like that voice inside of you that's always condemning you and then saying that that's God, And I think, that's kind of what a lot of us are told in a way, that everything you feel convicted about or everything you feel is God's doing, telling you that, So, and then another area is just personal identity.
Of course.
Where I think if you're becoming aware of your own identity and then you're being told that that's wrong.
Yeah.
Your sense of reality, your sense of, I either have to not be myself in order to belong, or I have to be myself and lose relationship and connection.
It's so complicated. Now, do you see religious trauma like impacting relationships a lot, or is it something that people deal with like on a solo basis, or do you think it sometimes impacts the way that we interact with each other?
If your sense of being in relationship is to annihilate parts of myself, then that's going to translate into other relationships. It really depends on how the religious trauma occurred and what the messaging is. It's so unique to each person, just like our stories.
Absolutely.
But I definitely think it carries into all of our relationships. If we feel unworthy before God, God is the ultimate decider of worth, right? So then we're going to feel unworthy in all of our relationships.
It resonates so much, what you're saying, is that like when there are parts of ourselves that we cut off or we feel like that are not acceptable no matter what, that we're not actually bringing our whole selves to relationships, how much of that is stuff that we need to deal with on our own first and then come to the relationship, or how much of it is stuff that we deal with in relationship and then bring back to ourselves?
Because part of the work of recovering, healing from religious trauma or any trauma is a return to trusting ourselves. And so when we're full of self-doubt all the time about whether we know what's right or wrong, or whether we can trust ourselves, everything is open to question. And so part of the work of recovering or healing from that is beginning to recognize, wait a minute, I am good, I am trustworthy. And sometimes that the sense of safety that's required to go there would dictate whether a person needs to do that on their own or in a relationship.
A lot of those times, the breakdowns that people have in relationships can end up playing out as either arguments or as other forms of conflict. Do you think that there are any immediate steps that people could take, or maybe should take, if they start to sense that conflict is inevitable or it's escalating beyond what they already have tools for?
Noticing is crucial, right? Like noticing, like they say in AA, what the first step is admitting
it, acknowledging.
So noticing that I'm having a reaction, that I'll use the word dysregulated, that I'm getting dysregulated. You're going to maybe notice what was going on 3 days later, right? Like, in the beginning, you're kind of like, you have a fight, and then it's like, I can't make sense of that until I calm down. Finally, I can kind of go, oh, wait a minute, I was feeling this and this and this. And that takes a lot of work. A lot of us were raised without emotional language, without understanding. We may know we feel fear, anger, happiness, but we don't know the nuances of that. Oh, I was feeling disrespected. Oh, I was feeling rejected, and then as we do our work, we begin to notice right after the fight, and then we notice in the middle of the fight, but we can't do anything about it because we're still too dysregulated. And then we start building the ability to pause and go, oh, I'm feeling, can I notice I'm getting on the escalator? Or can I notice my partner is on the escalator and I'm going to get on and join them? And I think one thing that helps is really realizing this. I really like to reframe conflict as a desire for connection and a fear that I'm not going to get it.
A desire for connection into fear that I'm not going to get it. It's kind of like the core redefinition of conflict.
Yeah.
So good.
And if you can understand that both of you are actually wanting to connect,
yeah,
you can kind of relocate the problem as not in your partner,
right,
or not in me.
Right.
It's out here. Our problem is something is getting in the way of our connection, and we're both freaking out.
Honestly, like what you said there, like just the ability to, in the middle of a conflict, in order for you to recognize something that you're doing, like the more that you practice it, the more you start saying, oh, like now I'm recognizing this in myself. And like now I'm recognizing this doesn't feel good, or this does work, or whatever. Even just the simple tool of saying that, like, at the root of conflict is the desire for connection and the fear that something's going to get in the way. Yeah. I'll be honest. Like, I think that if that is what everybody took out of this video, I think that that will be a first place. Yeah. It's like a tip that someone can take home and say, like, this is how I use this.
Right.
I can recognize this and I can use this. So a lot of times we have a desire to like help someone. We want to be that friend that sits with our friend as they're experiencing these trauma pieces, this hurt too much, too fast. So is there a good way for, if we see someone that we know is hurting, for us to help them and still maintain our ability to maintain safety for ourselves?
I think of, like, the immediate image came to my mind of my husband and I used to do, like, we were lifeguards for a very, very, very brief moment.
I love this.
But if someone is drowning, if you swim up to them, they're going to grab onto you and they're going to take you under. Right? The thing you have to do when you're trying to rescue someone who's drowning is you have to turn them away from you. Okay. And you have to kind of immobilize them. Sure. And grab them, and then you pull them into safety. Right. Because their desperation is going to take you down. I think part of it, again, is noticing. Am I starting to feel used? Am I starting to feel like we're here? I'm hearing the same thing over and over and over, and I'm tired of it. Am I feeling useless, powerless? Like, is there a plea to be rescued? And I think noticing what you're feeling, sometimes sitting on the bench means saying, wow, that sounds really hard. It might be helpful for you to talk to someone. Right. For regular folks, when you feel like someone is circling trauma and you know you don't have the skill set to really help them. And so I think when you notice that that's the pull, that's time to kind of pull away and hand that off to someone else.
Julie, I just want to thank you so much for your help and like the way that you've helped us process this conversation, for the way that you've helped people who are watching this. If someone wants to find out more about your practice, how would they do that?
I'm currently only seeing in-person clients on Mondays at the Mosher House on Walnut. But I'm hoping to get an office, a full-time office in that same building. Super. At the end of February, maybe March. But yeah, my website, fiddleleafcounseling.com.
Okay, great. And that's one thing that we really value here at the venues is that, like, Pastor Philip and I are pastors. We are not counselors and we don't pretend to be. And, you know, that's something that we try to provide for the community as a service is like, these are counselors that we would recommend. And you're definitely on that page and we recommend you. We think that you're doing a great job. So I just want to thank you.
Thank you
for that. And I also want to take just a second and just thank you all for joining us. We'll be releasing several of these over the next several weeks. We'll be talking about, for example, how do you come out to your family? We'll be talking about some practical steps when it comes to dealing with adult children as well and different relationship changes that happen when faith changes. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to either make them on the post here. You can email us at info@thevenues.org, or you can text us if that is convenient at 833-293-3092. And we'd love to be able to be in contact with you about that. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for joining us. And we will see you all later. Okay. Thanks.